So thanks everyone for joining us and listening. I'm Horam Naik. I'm a lawyer with a somewhat unusual path. I began working as a lawyer when I was 31, and before that I never made more than $40,000 in a year, just living all over the country and working a bunch of different jobs. I grew up pretty modestly and paid most of my way through college, and I had a full scholarship for law school, so I had a mixture of challenges and privilege. So after law school, I joined Big Law, and I took my finances very seriously. So now I have the freedom to pursue my interests, which includes having conversations like this. And I'm here because I wrote a post on LinkedIn about this journey and talked directly about the value in taking control of your finances and what the opportunities that gives you, which is, I think, something that's just not discussed enough, and specifically in law. And the post really resonated with a lot of people. It got 2,500 plus reactions, 2,200,000 plus views, which is a lot for me. And it made me realize I had something to share about finances that I could help others learn from as well. And that's why I want to talk to Adam Gill. I've known Adam for a while, since his time at Gertchen Keller, which was then the world's largest private fund focused on legal and regulatory risk. And then he joined Burford from there. And now he's founder and managing director at GLS Capital, which is one of the world's largest private investment firms focused on legal and regulatory risk. And before his time in litigation finance, Adam was a partner at Kirkland Ellis, which is, for those that don't know, one of the biggest firms in the world, and he practiced patent litigation there. Adam and I have known each other since his time at Gertchen Keller.
Sure. So that was actually before Kirkland. That was when I was at Deckert. So I started off my career as a young lawyer in the Palo Alto office of a firm, and our office eventually became Deckert. They acquired us, and there was an older attorney, and he was right around the time I was leaving. Which was a year or two into my career. He was leaving as well. I was going to Chicago, and he was retiring. And, he was kind of a legend in the office and in the Valley, I'm told. And I went up to him and I asked him, what advice would you have for a young lawyer? What would you tell yourself if you were me? And he said, master your craft. And I said, well, that's great, but, how do I do that? What's the best advice for that? And he said, make sure that you understand what you're doing and why you're doing it. At all times. And if you don't understand, ask. And so I thought that was really helpful, because it allowed me over the course of my career to understand the perspective, the larger perspective, and understand what we were trying to accomplish, so that when I would have ideas that might help us achieve that were not part of the task I was given, or when things came up that I was doing that seemed to be not furthering that, or even, adverse to that, I could raise my hand and ask somebody, hey, should we be doing it a different way, or I have an idea or something like that. And that's, I think, a way to really add value. And I was talking about this with a partner later in my career at Kirkland. I was still an associate at this time. And the partner told me, yeah, if you just sit in your office and you do what I ask you, you're pretty much worthless to me, because I need people with judgment. I need people that can operate independently, and that's what it takes. So I think it was good advice.
And, it's so interesting, what you're doing and why. And I guess that kind of, leads me to ask you about, why you pursued Big Law. And, there's lots of reasons why someone might enter Big Law, for the money, the status, the type of work you're doing, the career options. How did you think about it at the time, but why you enter Big Law? So, on the subject of what you're doing and why.
Sure. So I grew up in Washington, D.C., or a suburb right outside Washington, D.C. And so that's a town filled with lawyers and politics. And I saw politics as not quite as skills based, and the law more, based in the ability to actually do difficult things, based on, things that you learn rather than backslapping and that sort of thing. Not to denigrate politics, but I just felt like it was a more predictable path for someone who wanted to work on kind of intellectual merit. And so, I always thought, being a lawyer was a good opportunity for a profession. I didn't see, there were no manufacturing jobs around where I grew up. There was not a whole lot of industry. The kind of defense industry in the technical corridor that's now there didn't exist at the time. And so it's kind of natural for me to go into law. And once I did that, going into big law, the money is certainly helpful. I had law school loans and wanted to pay them off. I had a young family. You want to get started and get on your way towards financial independence. And some of the prestige, but not so much, based in ego, but based in the ability to open doors for the next move, right? The ability to go, somewhere else where you want to go. Freedom, I guess, in a professional sense rather than in a financial sense. But I perceived that as being, the benefits that big law provided for me.
And so when you were down that path, what point, was there an aha moment? Was there some moment that was really an inflection point you're thinking, saying, hey, I've got to do something different here. I've got to go my own way on this and figure out how to take control of my finances. Was there a moment like that for yourself?
There wasn't one specific moment. It was a process. And it was really two things. One was as I approach partnership at Kirkland Ellis, there certainly is a gate every year. If you have bad reviews, they will, basically tell you and show you the door in any year of your career. It's not just when you're up for partner. And I think that's ultimately a good thing, because if you're not doing well in year 2, they'll tell you and give you time to fix it. And if you're not doing well where you should be in year 4 or 5, 6, the same thing. And so for the firm, that results in a highly skilled kind of uniformly workforce. And I've heard that from some people who have left. And so I think that's good. And look, if you're not going to make it somewhere, I think it's good to know early on, and have the ability to make changes or start thinking about other things. And so I was always comfortable and doing well, but it changes when you're up for share partnership, because as we all know, that the pyramid has to get more narrow, and a lot of times that's where it happens. So being realistic, just in the terms of my odds, and in terms of what it takes, I thought about, is that the life I want to have? Certainly, and after the Great Recession as well, the calculus changed. It used to be, at least in our practice area in my firm, Kirkland, the pie was expanding. There's room for everybody because, patent litigation was growing tremendously. The firm was growing. The group was growing. And you got paid extraordinarily well along the way. When the Great Recession hit, bonuses got slashed. My bonus in my first year as a partner was, I think, 1/3 of the bonus the year before I made partner as an associate, and my review was the same, and the hours were the same. So the money that you were making changed. The work stayed the same or even increased. The pressure increased because I felt it went from kind of a how are you doing inquiry each year to a justify your existence inquiry each year, as firms were shedding tons of lawyers. And so when I looked at that existence on my way to share partnership, it wasn't really very attractive for me. So professionally, I had some concerns about stability in my life. In IP, especially as a patent litigator, I don't have a technical degree. And over, at the point I left Kirkland Ellis, I had been there for 10 years. And over that period, I had been digging in to the technical aspects of cases and working with, world-class experts. And I felt, I'm very technically competent. I can get into semiconductors and software and all that kind of stuff. So from a skills perspective, I feel very comfortable. However, if you're looking to go in-house or anywhere really in your career, making that move in the world of patent litigation or in patents, there's always that prerequisite that people want to see, a scientific degree. And I knew that would always be, an issue. So I was thinking, to myself, okay, maybe I should move for increased stability in the future. And how do I do that based on the fact that in the area I'm at, just from kind of some of the gating issues, I'll be in a disfavored bucket, even though I thought, exceptional experience and certainly the skill to do the jobs that I would be looking for. So that was swirling around professionally. And then in terms of, and economically, and then in terms of just what I wanted to do, that played a big part too. I remember some of the most rewarding parts of my time at Kirkland were when friends of mine who had businesses that had IP issues would come to me and want to talk about them and, potentially bring a case through Kirkland. And I would sit with them and usually I knew that, we were not the right match for them, either too expensive for a small company or the firm probably would not be interested in taking on a matter that might conflict them out of larger matters later. For whatever reason, it just wasn't a match. But I'd sit with them anyway because they were my friends and do the intake. I'd provide them, with, my thinking at the end of that on, things that they might do and where they were, what kind of help they needed. And they were truly grateful. And a lot of times most of the time that advice worked out very well for them. And a couple of them came back later and said, how well it worked out for them and how much they appreciated my advice. And that was really gratifying to me, in being a lawyer in these huge cases that we would do. It's task focused and not goal focused a lot of the time, right? You're focused on this part of the case or this part of discovery, and it doesn't feel terribly productive a lot of the time. And that weighed on me. And I really enjoyed doing counseling that was meaningful and helping people solve important issues to them. And so when I decided it was time to make a move, I wanted to make a move towards a path that would allow me to do more of that, which ultimately I concluded meant going in-house. When a business has a problem, the business people go to the legal people. Maybe it's the legal people in their specific business or department, or maybe it's the corporate legal people, depending on how the company is structured. That those legal people go up the chain, maybe to the general counsel, who goes to a senior partner at a firm, who puts the work down to more junior partners, who put the work down to associates. And at each transfer of information, you have something lost, right? Because you just tell the people what they need to know. You don't give them the full picture necessarily. And so by the time it gets to a junior partner or an associate, you're losing context and you're not being asked to help them really solve problems. You're asked to be a part and in providing a service and doing a specific task. And so I wanted to get closer to solving problems of a business, to feel like I was, frankly, being more productive. So ultimately, I made the decision that I did want to leave the firm and that my next move should be in-house in a role that allowed me access to helping solve the issues of the business. Certainly legal ones, but even better if there were practical business issues that I could contribute to solving.
And so how did you, so as far as, let's say, financial risk goes or financial consequences, like how did you manage to minimize the risk of a transition? Because I think that would be probably a big financial change. My understanding is going in-house conventionally, you're getting paid a lot less. So what put you in a position where you were comfortable with proceeding?
Saving money. The short answer is,
that's the good
I'm sorry?
That's the good stuff. I want to talk about that. So
okay.
How did you? What was? Did you when you first started out at Deckert and then to Kirkland? Were you maxing your 401k? What do you mean when you're saying you were saving money?
So I can't remember when I started. I don't think I did max out my 401k initially. I did before law school. I was a legal assistant, and I did put money away in a 401k there, and I put some money away in a 401k in my early years. I've always been the sole breadwinner of our family, and so living in San Francisco, even though the salaries of young lawyers were talked about a lot and were fairly high, still not a lot to put away after a San Francisco mortgage, and a family of four. So it was later on in my career that I was able to really max out everything. I wish I had done it earlier. I think that is one thing that I would say, and I have said to my kids and to young professionals, is max it out as early as you possibly can, and just learn to live within, your means, and set up your life so that you just never, miss that money, because it just goes automatically into your 401k. I think that there's such a huge effect of starting to save early in your career, letting that compound over time, putting it away, year after year after year. So that's I think critical in terms of long-term stability, unless you're counting on, an enormous payday somewhere down the road.
And so, like, how did you learn? I mean, so when did you really feel like you had a basic understanding of personal finance investing and a basic understanding of, hey, here's the value of compounding? Like, was there a time frame in your career, or was there a moment that you really felt like, hey, like I get this now, I get what this means?
Yeah, so I learned, I guess, a financial responsibility, I'll call it, from my mom. I was raised by a single mom. She's a professional. She had I have four brothers and sisters, so I'm the youngest of five. And I would see her balancing her checkbook every month, and I would see her living within her means. The mentality was work hard and save your money. And the mentality also was, if you don't have the money, then maybe we can't afford it and we should wait, as opposed to buy it on credit and pay it off later. So I think that was the kind of the foundation of my financial thinking, my financial understanding, financial responsibility.
How did you get the financial expertise and judgment that you have now? I mean, how did you learn that? I mean, is that something that you set out, you just learn on your own? Were there mentors you had? I mean, what did it take for you to get financial judgment?
My mom, my early years, she was a professional. She's a nurse, and I have four brothers and sisters, so I'm the youngest of five. And so I would see her balancing her checkbook, and I would hear things like work hard and save your money on a regular basis. And the way that she ran the family's finances was from a perspective of, we do what we can, and kind of from a perspective of living within your means, as opposed to living on credit, spending now and paying for it later. So she always instilled in us, I think, those values which have served me well. I've always lived absent student loan, car, and house payment, relatively debt free, which I think is important. And that discipline is important. So that's kind of where I think I got the basis of my thinking about financial responsibility. Going into investing later in life and thinking about that, I've always been interested in finance. That's kind of what drew me away from specific businesses that were involved in finance. When I was at Clinton Ellis, I would trade Chinese micro caps in my personal account, just all a mess, because that was fun. Chinese micro caps, because our conflict at Clinton Ellis is particularly challenging. It seems like we are either representing or adverse to everybody. So things like Chinese micro caps were a place where I could actually do some trading without too much worry about that, and it was fun. And so I learned, I got an account at a place called TradeStation. They have a very sophisticated platform with really robust data available and software. They have a whole programming language for programming models and strategies. You can even automate them if you want. You can do extensive back testing and optimization. And so I got really into that, just kind of out of as a hobby, and enjoyed it. Taught myself their programming language, and would make models and would make strategies, and so I just kind of was drawn to that and did that for a number of years. what I learned from that is I was, very good at making models that perform well in a directional market, very good at making models that perform well in a flat market, but neither of those things are particularly revolutionary or impressive. Anybody can really do that. But the trick is knowing which market you're in, right? And that's the rub, knowing what's going to happen in the future. And I think it's really difficult to do that from a kind of a technical analysis basis. And so I fell into more fundamental analysis. And just for the viewers who don't understand those terms, perhaps technical analysis is more predicting the market movements in the future based on charting and chart patterns, whereas fundamental analysis is more looking at a particular company based on, or even an industry based on the fundamental financials. So going through their financial statements, thinking about what their particular revenue, expenses, market opportunity is going to be in the future. And so that's kind of what I got drawn to a little bit more as I went along, even though I do think, the trading aspect is exciting and a lot of fun.
What did you discover about yourself? I mean, so it's interesting that you kind of realize, okay, there's this epistemological issue of understanding, what market you're in. What did you discover, or what point did you discover? Because there's something different about you, right? I mean, you've gone down a path that, few lawyers have gone down. And so what was the point in which you realized there was something different about yourself, that, you would set yourself down on a path that few others were going to follow, and that there was something different about your outlook and, your judgment? And I guess the way that I put it for myself is, I discovered over time that, being a passive buy and hold investor seemed like the most obvious thing. It just seems like the simplest and most obvious thing. You just buy every month, and you buy what you can. You don't overextend yourself, but you buy as much as you can. And over time, I discovered, okay, apparently there's any number of perfectly intelligent people, high income people, who don't have that discipline and patience. And so that was something that I realized, okay, that's a competitive advantage, and that means something. That's something I can use in other domains. It's something I can apply to other areas of my practice. Say, okay, what are ways in which I can start rolling a ball? It'll just like roll the snowball down a hill, and it'll just grow and grow. So, I mean, that understanding myself affected myself professionally. What about yourself? What is it about these experiences that experiences like, trading these microcaps, or, working in litigation finance, that really taught yourself, hey, there's something different about me, and here's what I can do with it?
That's a good question. I think I'd say the reason I'm doing what I'm doing now is because I moved in a direction of things that I like to do professionally, and took action on them. And then when opportunities arose, I was there to take advantage of them. So what do I mean by that? So when I decided to leave Kirkland & Ellis, I had to do a lot of soul searching. I guess I didn't have to, but I did, because I wanted it to be a successful move. And I think that's part of the hardest thing of people when they're thinking about, do I stay at this firm, or do I go to another firm, or do I stay at any firm, or go in-house, or what do I do next? For me, it's a difficult thing. It's a lot of uncertainty, and it's not fun for me to do that kind of soul searching, to say, what do I want to do? What are my skills? What am I good at? What do I have to offer? And so I did that at Kirkland. Part of what we talked about before was part of that. And then part of it was, what do I want to do with myself? And so I set out a couple things, and one of them was things in the financial industry. I thought that was really interesting subject matter. And so I told a couple partners that I trusted that I was interested to leave the firm, and had a conversation about that with them, about what I was looking to do. And maybe 9 months or a year later, one of them came to me and said, hey, I just talked to somebody who's starting up this company, a guy in the legal industry, and it seems pretty interesting. And I thought you might be interested in what they're doing. And so he put me in touch with a group called IPXI. It was started by Ocean Tomo and Jim Malachowski there. And it was a group that was creating or trying to create a patent licensing business using a financial markets model. So commoditizing licenses and having them on an exchange that can be bought and sold as basically commodity instruments. I thought that was really interesting, and so I went and spoke with them. They had just gotten kind of their startup funding, and they had an impressive list of members that were their founding members, and I thought it'd be really exciting to join and help them think through a lot of the issues that still remained unsolved, and they seemed very welcoming of that. So I ended up joining them. And then while I was there, my conflicts from Kirkland fell away for my personal trading. And so I quickly gravitated towards trading stocks and options of companies that were involved in patent litigation because of my expertise in that. And I felt like I had an edge over the market. And from that, I started, and this is just in my personal account, so small amounts. And from that, I started writing on the subject as well, posting articles. And one of those companies that I wrote about, I was put in touch with through a series of totally random events. And they happened to have a board member, whose name was Ashley Keller, who was in Chicago. And they said, you should really meet him. And I did. And it turned out he was doing the same thing for a hedge fund that I was doing in my personal account, which was, basically making investments based on calling the outcome of litigation. He was focused more broadly on litigation generally, including patent litigation. So we became friends and got to comparing notes every couple of weeks. And he's the Keller and Gerchen Keller. And when he and Adam Gerchen started Gerchen Keller, he asked me if I would be willing to do some consulting for them if they were seeing patent matters. And I said, of course. And then a few months into that, they were seeing so much in the way of patents that they asked me to come and join them, which I jumped at. And so part of it was luck, being in the right place at the right time, but that only came from my pursuing and doing things that I was interested in, and not from a perspective of a job. It was from a perspective I just want to do it. In fact, I remember sitting and writing my first article that I published and sitting on my couch at 11 o'clock at night thinking to myself, I could watch some TV, or I could write this article, or I could go to bed. Why am I doing this? And I answered myself, because it's fun. And so I wrote the article, and the rest, as they say, is history. And I give that advice to young lawyers or to people now who are thinking about leaving firms. As you may know, when you leave a firm, a lot of people who are still there reach out and to talk to you about, leaving and what it was like, or perhaps for help. And I hear a lot of people tell me, oh yeah, I'm interested in finance too. And I'll ask them, well, what do you do? Like, what does that mean? And sometimes it just means that they like money, which everybody does. But if they're truly interested in finance or startups or whatever, there are ways without going to get clients in the space that you can go and participate, especially as an attorney, right? You're a highly skilled professional, and there are certainly people that can use your help. And so if it's business, or if it's finance, or if it's whatever, go find that community, go be a part of that community and contribute to it, whether it's providing pro bono services or doing things in your spare time, like writing articles, not necessarily law articles, but maybe you write articles in a trade publication that have a legal angle, but people appreciate that. And it puts you in the flow with respect to something you're interested in. And so that's, without doing that intentionally to get the job I have now, that's what I did. I just went in the direction of what I like to do. And that puts you in the flow to be there when opportunities arise. Otherwise, you won't be there when there are opportunities, and those opportunities are not going to seek you out.
Yeah, I love that, because that gets at this whole chicken and egg thing of, because we were talking about earlier about this whole concept of creating value, so even as you can see someone and say, okay, wow, they're an associate or a partner in Kirkland, that's so impressive. But then when you trace out that whole arc of, well, the genesis of the issues that they're working on, you can see how attenuated it is and how much more task oriented it is. And so the conundrum that you recognize was, okay, well, then how do I create more value? And, there's this sort of chicken and egg thing of putting yourself in a position to get in a position where you can create more value. And so that's, I think that's where financial independence comes in mind is, like building yourself a foundation where you have some means, you have some control, and then you can take these kind of, these, I don't even think risk is the right word to use because, what's a risk in writing an article? Like you're saying, it's just something you can do 11 o'clock at night instead of watching a movie. But you put yourself in a position where, you're kind of like buying these like call options, if you will, just on potential opportunities. And I love that you're saying that, yes, that's something you can do now. I think it's analogous to financial independence. There's things you can do now. You can max out your 401k, and that's important. But I think in parallel, I think it's really interesting to talk about, what are the other forms of value you're creating for yourself and ways to move in a step forward in that direction that you want to go in.
Yeah, and it can be it doesn't even need to be coming in and writing articles somewhere like that. It can be something as simple as joining an industry association and getting to just being a part of the community, right? If you like construction or, startups or whatever, participate in industry meetings, even as just an attendee. And you'll see what the industry is talking about, and you'll see the issues that they're facing, and then you can get involved in those. And especially as lawyers, it'd be one thing if this was a podcast or a recording for high school graduates or students, because that you're in a much more limited ability to help people. But as lawyers, I mean, really have a great ability to help people think through legal issues, address legal issues, or even just apply that critical reasoning in a perhaps non-legal way. So there's definitely opportunity. And it's just important to go do something about it and recognize that it's not just about, going and getting a client for the firm. That's not all that professional development is, especially personal professional development. It's about doing the step of thinking, where do you want to go? And then taking steps in that direction kind of presently, and getting yourself in a spot where when things getting yourself in the spot where opportunities are, and then so that you're there when they appear and can take advantage of them. It's very important.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's really interesting to see how that is like that sort of long-term thinking, that underlies financial judgment, financial independence, as well as career control. And to me, it seems like the two go hand in hand. I mean, I think you want financial independence so that you can put yourself in a position where you can have interesting conversations with people you want, work in things that you want. And you do that in bits and pieces. It's not some huge leap. So we talked about, I think of the people listening to this, and I think some people are maybe very early in their path towards financial independence. And I think we talked about some of the basic things that they can do there to understand, it's important to hear from someone like yourself. I think, they can hear from any number of places, okay, yes, you should save and invest. But I think to hear from someone who's actually done this, I think is really important. I think that's the purpose of this conversation, is to make this more tangible for people. But I found, so even before I entered law school, I worked in finance briefly. It was kind of a weird stint that I is a conversation for another time as a futures broker. But in that time, I learned a lot about finance and taught myself a lot. And I didn't have any money to speak of course, as we noted, but I learned about what people who had money did. And so that was really helpful for me in thinking ahead, say, hey, when I have money, here's the things I'm going to be doing, and here's how I'm going to think about that. So I think it might also be helpful for someone who has the financial success that you do. Maybe you can tell a little more about, maybe we can get a glimpse into your world. And so just so people can understand what they can aspire to and how they should be thinking about it. So I myself, I've taken the position that, finances are one thing you can't ever really outsource. I don't see a way where, it's like your health. You can't outsource your health. And to me, your financial health is the same. And so do you use an advisor? Do you control your asset allocation? Can you speak a little about that, so people who are maybe in a position where they've progressed a little bit down the field and they have some assets, and they're trying to get a better sense of understanding what to do with it. Can you speak to those things?
Sure. So yeah, most of my, well, actually, pretty much all of my investments are self-directed. At this point, I was um, I was disappointed. It was an eye opener for me. The recession that happened in 2008, 2009. You know, uh, I looked around and I saw how many financial advisors advise people to pull back exposure or to move out of certain stocks, um, financial stocks or whatever during that time period. And if professionals can't see something that big and that structural coming, then really what's the value there in those people? And so I'm not saying that nobody did a good job, but the people that I think kind of, let's call them ordinary investors, have access to, right? I'm sure family offices and hedge funds probably did maybe on balance better than the average Joe, but I don't have access to those people managing my portfolio. So I thought, well, if there aren't people who can do that, then it was for something that big, then how can they get these little things right? And so for my asset allocation and what I invest in, I take a pretty conservative approach, which is, a lot of index funds. I still reserve a little bit of my portfolio just to do kind of what I want with, maybe some swing trading, meaning take advantages of medium term trends, industries that I think might be coming up in the future, or businesses that I think are particularly good. Google is one that I put in my portfolio a long time ago just because I thought, hey, these guys are basically a fire hydrant of cash, and they've been growing consistently. So I thought that was a good investment. That said, something I didn't invest in for that same reason a long time ago, which I probably should have, was Amazon, right? And I quite frankly haven't understood Amazon's rise as it has been, because from a investor standpoint, if a unit of stock is the amount that company is going to give you back over a period of time, Google has way outperformed because they have been hugely profitable and provided tons of dividends, where Amazon is not, or not nearly as much. But Amazon obviously is worth way more and has taken that ballistic ride. And as a factual matter, that was the better bet. But I take a little bit more conservative positions. So the ones, I'll take some bets like that on big name, well known companies. And I like Warren Buffett a lot. I like his thinking on investing. Reading Warren Buffett was, I remember, very helpful for me, because he takes a very simple view of investing. The value school of investing doesn't require a ton of hyper technical analysis. It requires a ton of diligence and self control. And I really like that. So I like the Berkshire Hathaway stock and their model. But other than a couple little things like that, which are relatively safe bets as well, that are pretty correlated to the market anyway, a lot of index funds, and I like to leave them there long term. I don't try to call the tops and the bottoms, because statistically they've shown over time it's extraordinarily difficult to do, and I don't have anywhere near the amount of time necessary to even try to do that kind of stuff. And so I think for me, it's just recognizing that how difficult it is to do that kind of thing, to pick individual stock winners, certainly over the short term, and to just give a broad-based long-term view and let it be there long term. And I think large cap US, large cap international markets are fine places to do that. I'm a little overweight stocks just because of my age. I've got the ability to to wait for a rebound. Stocks outperform bonds in the long term, and so even if the stock market goes down significantly, I don't need to access that money for several decades. So, or let's not call it several anymore, maybe a couple. So, so with the time horizon that I have, I'm a little bit probably overexposed to equities relative to what, people advise. But that's kind of my overall strategy. Also for having, weird or esoteric stuff in my portfolio. I think I'm generally overexposed to that in my life because of my career, right?
Mm-hmm.
My job is, and my previous job, which I had, was investing in litigation outcomes. So that's uncorrelated to the market. It's highly variable, alternative investment. And so just having the interests in my current fund and held over from my previous work, I've got a lot of exposure to kind of alternative investments. So I don't feel the need to put, much, if any, more of that in my investment portfolio.
Mm. And that's very interesting and very helpful for people to understand, what they can expect for themselves, and very helpful to hear, how you're thinking about correlation. And like the income you're getting from your work is already, there's risks associated with that. So that's already exposure to a certain kind of risk. So it's good to de-risk by doing things that are passive as well. Well, I'm mindful of our time horizon here, and I wanted to give you an opportunity for parting thoughts. And the one question I ask is, what is it that you want people to learn from your path, and what mistakes can they avoid because of the things you've learned, specifically focusing on financial independence?
I'd say that is to start saving and save early, to understand what your goals are, and to be realistic and always be learning aggressively in achieving those goals.